afternoon. I'm here with Katherine Jackson, who is one of 5 individuals running for the school board for the town of Plymouth, and there's 3 slots open. So welcome. I'm going to call you Kathy, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, that's perfect.
All righty. We're going to get right into the questions, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
All right. $119 million budget that passed at town meeting will fund the department at the current level. Mm-hmm. It does not include pay raises that are being negotiated with school unions, and more will be requested in the fall. How do you determine your budget priorities, given the mandates that you have no control over, the undetermined pay raises, and the state funding, which has not been finalized?
So this year, we collaborated with the select board, which is how we start most years. You collaborate with the town manager and the select board to come together to talk about what the overall budget is and then what your breakdown is going to be. Mm-hmm. We knew going into this year that there would be some challenges. There are a couple different challenges and a couple different reasons for them. One was transportation, another one was special education, and I can speak more about those. Mm-hmm. And I'm blanking on the next one, but we had definitely had a few hurdles to overcome. So what we decided to do, just for the transparency of everything, was to work on a zero-based budget. So we went back to every department, and it didn't say, let's do a level service budget, but let's do a zero-based budget, which means...
No, go ahead, because some people don't know the difference.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to go back to every department, and we're going to have you start from zero and look at everything that you need and what's a need and what's a want.
Okay.
And so your need versus your want, and then we're going to break it down, and we're just going to go with the needs right now.
Okay.
Because our priorities are being able to keep everything that's forward-facing, which I mean student-facing,
yep,
the most important. And also to be able to work within the parameters of the negotiations and the things that we know are going to be coming up.
Okay. So the overall budget includes how many schools?
7 elementary schools, mm-hmm, 2 middle schools, mm-hmm, 2 high schools, mm-hmm, and an alternative school.
Okay. Can you talk, what is the alternative school?
The alternative school is Harbor Academy, mm-hmm, and that's located in the administration building. Mm-hmm. It primarily focuses with high school students and just gives them a different access to be able to conclude their education, yep, if the straightforward way that many students go doesn't work
Didn't
for
work
them.
for them.
Yes.
Okay. So this is huge. Your budgets are huge. You're asking
Right.
people, instead of level funding, which is a lot of towns will ask their
Right.
school committees, meaning keep it the same as it was last year.
Yes.
You're asking everybody to start from zero,
yep,
and build your budget.
Right.
So it's almost like prove to us what you really need.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. How did the schools do?
I think the administration did a fantastic job. We were faced with a lot of challenges over the last couple of years that were unexpected. So first of all, we have ESSER funds going away. So for those
ESSER
people who
funds?
don't understand,
Yep.
it's ESSR.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the national funds that we were provided because of COVID.
Okay.
And so when funds were not booming in the last couple of years, we were able to use some of those things to fund like capital projects, yep, or things like that.
So those weren't restricted. You could use that for anything in your budget.
There were parameters around them, but you were encouraged to use them for things that were like finite things, like capital projects.
Okay.
So if you're using, yes,
specific
exactly,
project.
a specific
Okay.
project.
Okay.
And to be able to keep the schools running at a time when there wasn't a lot going on with the economy.
Okay.
For us, transportation is also a big thing. For people who don't know, Plymouth is about the same size as Boston,
yeah,
geographically.
Yeah.
Demographically, we're more spread out.
Yeah.
And most of our roads run north to south, which presents a lot of challenges when it comes to busing.
Now, why is that?
Because you can't build just a route from north to south. So, I mean, you can, but you end up having more routes because, like, you incorporate the part of the state forest.
Yeah, oh, yeah, right.
So then you have people who may be very close to somebody else mileage-wise, but you have the state forest in between them.
Right.
You know what I
right,
mean?
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah,
make
you
sense?
gotta go around. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And so then you have to go around, so then that's a separate bus route.
Okay.
And then in addition, we have special education funding.
We'll talk about that separately. The whole.
This is regarding to transportation,
Okay.
but we can include that in there too. Right
Yep.
now, there is no cap on, we are legally required to transport people who go to sub-separate programs that we can't accommodate.
Right.
And right now, there is no cap or no restrictions on those transportation services.
Okay.
And
that's a
sometimes they
huge
can
number.
run up to like $800 a day for one student.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So after all the schools came up with their presentations
Yeah.
and presented and said, okay, we're going to build it from ground zero, did they all do a good job?
Oh yeah, yeah. If I was to give you the budget, which we have like printed books that anybody who wants to review the budget could come in and look at, you would be able to look by cost center. There were no surprises.
Okay. It's all pretty much in black and
Yes.
white. Okay.
Any surprises that happened are things that we've talked about openly.
Okay.
That were surprises to us too, that we had to incorporate in the budget, but it had nothing to do with the cost centers
Okay.
or the departments or
They all do their job.
They all
exactly
do their
as
job.
they're supposed to be.
Exactly.
So the one thing that's left then is the pay raises that are being negotiated with the unions.
Right.
So is that a no control issue?
It's not a no control issue. So we know that we have a certain amount of money to work with right now. We also know that the teachers over the last couple of years have, for lack of a better word, sacrificed and taken like 1-2% raises, and this has not kept up with inflation.
Right.
So in order to be able to move those employees forward who, frankly, during a very challenging time of COVID and a very challenging time continuously with mental health and things of that nature that have come out of COVID, it's time for us to figure out how to make that work
For them.
for them.
And so you can keep them too.
So we can keep
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Yes.
that's
and
always a-
I mean, that's really the most important part, right? And
Right.
in addition to the fact that if we can't negotiate it, we'll be looking at choices that we may not want to make.
Right.
You also are looking at towns, neighboring towns, where people are getting paid like $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 more for the same job.
Yeah.
And as much as they want to stay in Plymouth because they love this district, if you're working a second job at
Right.
Bath and Body Works because you can't make bills meet and you can go
Right.
to a neighboring town, what would be your choice?
Oh, absolutely. No, I get it. Okay, number 2. What is your philosophy on special education? And what do you think it means for students to be supported in the least restrictive environment?
Special education is an extremely complicated topic, and even after 3 years of being on the school committee, I feel like I have only just brushed the surface on what it means to be a part of special education. For the school committee, we're primarily focused on policy and budget, so the role that we would play in special education would be policy and oversight of the superintendent. But we're not really able to get involved in a case-by-case basis unless it's maybe trying to assist in getting communication to the right person.
Okay. But no, you said budget. So the special education budget, I'm sure, has increased dramatically over the
Oh, yeah.
past 4 or 5 years. Not only for the amount of students that are taking advantage of special education
Right.
programs, but the transportation of
Yes.
them. So budget does come back to you
Yes, partially.
as a body. Okay.
There's also another part which I was talking about before, which is the sub-separate programs that we are legally required to pay tuition for. So
Right.
we have a lot of programs in our district, but we also have some students that don't fall into that criteria that we then need to provide education for still.
Right.
And they will end up at these other programs, and we're legally required to pay the tuition
And the transportation.
transportation. And last year, traditionally, it's gone up by 1 to 2%.
Yeah.
Last year, it went up by 14%.
Which is huge.
And it was huge. It was an unexpected blow to the budget last year that we were not expecting.
What caused that? Why did it go up so much?
It's mandated by the state. It's
Yeah.
something that many towns tried to argue because, as you can imagine, it affected every town in the state of Massachusetts,
Right.
and it was something that nobody was expecting.
Because it's a mandate, but it's not funded.
Exactly.
Yeah, the state says you have to do it, but we're not going to give you any money to do it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we tried to go back and negotiate a smaller or a step program in which you would end up doing the same thing, but not all at the same time. And there really wasn't a lot of footing with the state to move forward on that. So I do believe in equity in education, including special education, not just equity as a race, gender.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
And I think it's important that our special education students also get equal opportunities
Sure.
as much as we can provide them to them.
Right.
There will always be, there's always a cap on what we can afford.
Right.
So you have to work within those parameters, unfortunately, because we would like to be able to do everything for
Right.
everybody.
But looking at the budget going forward, let's go
Right.
3-5 years, do you see that more and more and more students will be taking advantage of special education programs?
I think it's possible. I mean, it certainly seems to be trending that way.
Right. And how do you build that into a budget?
I think you look forward, like right now we're working on the strategic plan, and so we're not done with that. It's not, it's still a working document, so it's not something that, that's out for public purview.
publication. Right, right.
But at the same time, when you're doing things like working on the strategic plan, you look at things like what I said before, what does equity mean?
Right.
And so when we're talking about services, what puts somebody on not an even playing field, but a playing field that can accommodate them to be as successful as they can be.
Right, right. So aside from special education, you also have a very robust, more than a robust program for occupational education.
Oh, yes.
Vocational education. Now, if a student wants to do something and you don't have it, if they want to concentrate on something and you don't have it at either north or south,
Right.
do you have to then send them to another school that does have
Yes. Yep, so as an
it?
example.
So that's not special ed. That's,
No.
that's curriculum.
It's right. So as an example, in the tech program, there are a lot of students that are going for agricultural.
Yep.
And so we are sending them, I think, to Bristol Aggie.
Yeah.
And we're legally also responsible to pay for that and to pay for their transportation in the same vein, because we're required to provide them with the education if it's not available here.
Okay.
So
Do you get any pushback on that philosophy from maybe parents who say, okay, well, they can go to a private school for that? Or, I don't mean the parents of the students that are
Right.
taking advantage of this, I mean
Yes.
other parents.
I personally have not. I mean, I think there's always a ebb and flow when
Yeah.
it comes to different things and different opinions. And we certainly saw that during COVID. My personal philosophy when I came to looking at those things is that in general, whether somebody's philosophies align with mine or not, at the end of the day, almost every one of those people is looking to do the best that they can for their children. And so when you look at it from the perspective, this is not personal, this has
Right.
nothing to do with me, this has to do with them trying to do the best that they can for their child, it changes your perspective
Sure.
and the way that you communicate with people on things.
Okay. Question number 3. There are often two very different sides to subject matters that can come before the school board. How do you navigate your personal opinions, you kind of just talked about this, in regards to complex issues? And can you give a couple examples?
Sure. Well, COVID was one of them, of
Yeah.
course.
So
And
when you say that, what happened during COVID?
so like the masking debate, some people were for masks, some people were not for masks. And whatever your personal opinion, some people were very concerned about their children and what masks were doing to them. And other people were concerned about their children and what the possibility of illness would do to them. And so that's a very difficult conversation to navigate because it's very personal.
Right.
The decision part was actually easy because we were mandated by the state. We didn't have any decision to make. So the state said you have to mask, we have to do
Right.
it. We can do more than what they mandate, but we can never
Just
do less.
Right.
So that's one example where the communication came into play, and so having to communicate that to people and saying, I understand how you're feeling and why you're feeling the way that you are, and that you're trying to do the best that you can, but we're legally obligated to do things this way.
Right.
Another conversation that has come up is religion in schools.
Yeah, talk about that, because that seems to be prevalent in a lot of schools right now.
Right. So I've had several conversations with people about the idea of religion in schools, and I myself went to Catholic school for 4 years. So what I do is try and break it down for people in a way that sort of mirrors what they're trying to say. So we're not using religion in schools, but we are using the general principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so when you talk about how the principles that we're using in secular education match what they're trying to, what they're trying to accomplish, it sort of, gets to a place of understanding.
Right.
I feel like one of the biggest problems in politics and in life in general is that people don't know how to talk to each other. And more importantly, they don't know how to listen. So I think generally speaking, you're always going to have people at the extremes, but most people do not fall into that. And so if you could sit down both sides and have them stop and listen to each other versus try to be heard, you would actually have a more dynamic conversation. And so I try and implement that policy myself, that I listen more than I speak. And I try and understand where somebody's coming from. So I try and visualize their narrative and their perspective before I respond with my own.
And my last question is, how do you interact with parents, and what type of outreach do parents have to the school committee specifically, and what do you do with that?
So
complaints or lauding something or whatever it is.
they can contact us about just about anything.
Okay.
Whether we have any oversight onto it, it depends. I've had everything from emails to phone calls to conversations at my daughter's basketball games, and I'm pretty much open to talking to people many times, mostly whenever they approach me.
Yep.
And then can you repeat the question?
Well, when parents come to you,
yes.
I know I've talked to a number of people on different school committees, and it's hard because you listen as a person,
yes,
but you have to be part of the collective group.
Right.
So can a parent come to you individually, or can they, and then do you have to bring whatever they brought to you to the whole group, and do you discuss it?
Depends on the situation. If they're talking to me as a person and just voicing their concern about something, and I'm able to answer them and give them the information that they want, then there's no need to bring it to the school committee.
Because that's more factual.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just explaining a situation, or they want to vent to me about something, but they don't want any action.
Okay.
Oftentimes I'll ask somebody, where do you want me to take this? Because a lot of times they just want to feel heard.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want action, and so I'll explain what's in the scope of what I'm able to do.
Yeah.
And I'll at least let our chair and the superintendent know about the conversation, so that if somebody does pursue it, they're aware.
Yep.
And if they want me to pursue it on their behalf, then I do so. But if it's not something under my purview, then I will direct them to the right person, facilitate a conversation, and then leave it to the person who can handle the situation best. Okay,
perfect. So, in your opinion, what are Plymouth Public Schools' greatest strengths, and what is the areas that need the most improvement? And this can be a whole list if you want.
I would say one of the greatest strengths is their ability to work collaboratively to try and make things as successful as possible.
When you say them, who do you mean? The school district?
The administration, the school district, the teachers. I feel like Plymouth really works as a community, and I don't feel like you often find that. I also feel the school committee works as a community. We have some conservative and some liberal people, but we can always find a conversation, and we can always find a middle ground. And these days, that's not what you find often.
True.
I think that progressing forward with goals tonight at the school committee will be, handing in our assessments of Dr. Campbell for his evaluation in a couple of weeks. And so I spent a long time reviewing goals and things like that. And really everything he's set out to do for the year, in my opinion, he's accomplished. He's had coffee and conversation type things. He's had podcasts. He's had learning walks at different schools. I mean, these are all things that are meant to improve and push the schools forward, and I think he does a great job with that.
Okay.
And you can't do that without the support of your community and your staff and your teachers.
Absolutely. And what are the areas that you really think Plymouth needs to work on?
As a school or Plymouth as a community?
Well, you're speaking
Yes.
for the school, so and that can be at any school. It could be
Yes.
elementary. It could be all the way up to the high schools.
I mean, I think things are always evolving. We have tons of communication that goes out. I think we're still trying to figure out how to reach people in the best way possible. Because I have heard from others in the community that they don't feel like there's enough communication. When you look at it, there's actually a lot of communication, but I'm wondering if maybe it's not in the right way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If we're still trying to figure out what reaches the most people.
Right.
You know,
and
there are,
sometimes you have to have a number of different avenues.
exactly.
To reach different people.
So I would say that's something we're still working on, but it's definitely an effort that, you know, like a very focused effort.
Yep. And do you find that the number of schools that you have is too much? Do you see ever, I know there's been talk before of consolidating schools in order to possibly save money?
So consolidating schools, we had talked about, and we do have something that we put out to the select board again to try and build a new school for possibly the Cold Spring Hedge area in the future. So far, that's not something that's immediately happening. We are reaching out to try and be approved by the Mass Association of School Committees for that portion that they would contribute to that.
So you're talking about closing 2 schools and building a new one that would
Yes.
combine the populations.
Exactly.
And those are in North Plymouth, I believe?
Yes.
Okay.
We wouldn't get rid of the building. I mean, the dream is to have that building as like a community resource center through the schools. And so I don't think we're shrinking it as much for the community as much as it is for the fact that schools have to meet certain standards when it comes to the quality of the building
Yeah.
and the space.
The infrastructure.
The
Yeah,
infrastructure, right. So in the case of some of our older buildings, when you're looking at fixing certain things in order to be compliant with ADA guidelines, you cannot exceed 30% of the cost of the building with your repairs.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you do, then you have to make the building ADA compliant.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that you can just immediately see some of the challenges there
Yeah.
would be with that. So
Yeah.
like, how would you put an elevator in Hedge School?
That'd be tough.
Exactly.
Right.
So as much as we love the building and the space and want to preserve it, there will be a point that we have to make some changes. And so we are trying to think now about those things so
Right.
that we can best serve the community.
Okay.
And we don't want to move it too far away from that community because it is primarily a community and a walking community, and that's important to that group of people.
Right.
So it's important for us to preserve that for them as well.
Okay. Report card. F being the worst, A plus being the best. What does the entire district get in your opinion right now?
I would say a B+.
Okay. That's good. That's a good grade. Okay. We're going to let you take about 2 minutes to talk to the constituents on your own
Okay.
and let them know why you think that they should vote for you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to our conversation. I am passionate about the Plymouth Public Schools and about what they bring to our community. I feel like the schools, the teachers, the staff, and the students are the backbone of our community, whether you have kids in school or not. So I think it's very important that we support those things, and that's really what's important to me moving forward. I feel like supporting the teachers who have supported us through COVID is important. I feel like when you support your community of schools, you are supporting the future, because those students that are part of these schools will come back. They will get jobs here, they will build houses here, they will buy houses and raise families here, and they will be the future of our community. In addition, if you don't have kids here, the quality of our schools also reflect in the property values of your houses. So when the schools aren't supported, your properties aren't supported, your taxes won't go down, but your property value will. And so I think it's really important to look at the overall picture of what a good school brings to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much. We wish you the best of luck through this election season.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And please do make your voices heard by voting on or before the 18th of May in the Plymouth town election. Thank you and good day.